You helped my mother when I didn't.
It was the kind of night that made Chicago feel like a forgotten city. The wind howled down Lincoln Street like it had something to prove, throwing sheets of snow across the sidewalks and rattling old neon signs that flickered half alive. The streets were mostly empty. No sane person was out unless they had to be. And Jasmine Reed? She had to be. It was 5 minutes to midnight when Jasmine stepped outside the Lincoln Street diner, her breath curling in the air like smoke. Her uniform was damp from a spill earlier. Her shoes were 2 winters past retirement, and her feet ached from 12 straight hours on her feet. But she didn't complain. Jasmine never complained. Complaining doesn't pay the rent. She pulled her coat tighter and turned to lock the diner door when something stopped her cold. A wheelchair. Just sitting there, right under the busted street lamp on the corner, the light blinking like a warning. Inside the chair sat an old woman. She wasn't moving. Her white hair was soaked, plastered to her forehead. Her arms trembled in the freezing wind. Her eyes were wide, confused, like she wasn't sure how she got there or why no one had helped. Jasmine blinked, trying to process what she was seeing. Was she lost? Was this some kind of medical transport gone wrong? 100 questions raced through her mind, but one thing was clear. If someone didn't act soon, this woman wasn't going to last the night. She didn't think, she moved. Jasmine ran into the snow, her shoes sliding on the ice. Her hands were numb by the time she reached the woman. "Ma'am," she called out, kneeling beside her, "are you all right?" The woman turned, eyes wet with something deeper than snow. "My son was supposed to pick me up from the clinic," she whispered. "He said he would. I waited. He never came." Jasmine felt something twist in her chest. She didn't have time to think about what was proper or safe or expected. All she knew was this woman needed help and no one else was stopping. That decision, that one choice, it would change her life forever. Because what Jasmine didn't know was who this woman really was, and what was coming next would turn her world completely upside down. Before we go back, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. And if you're ready for a story that proves kindness can be more powerful than money, stick around. You won't want to miss this. Jasmine Reed wasn't supposed to be working the graveyard shift, not tonight. But when Carla called in sick and the manager didn't have anyone else to cover, Jasmine didn't hesitate. She never hesitated. She couldn't afford to. At 29, Jasmine's life wasn't anything like she thought it would be. She'd once dreamed of becoming a teacher. She loved kids, had even started college with a full heart and a vision board taped to her dorm wall. But life has a way of pulling the rug out when you least expect it. First came the call from home. Her mom diagnosed with early onset dementia. Then came the bills, then the jobs, then her daughter Ava. By the time she turned 24, Jasmine had dropped out, moved back to Chicago, and was juggling 3 part-time gigs just to keep the lights on. Now, 5 years later, her days started before the sun and ended long after it set. She worked at the Lincoln Street Diner, did freelance house cleaning on weekends, and picked up evening babysitting shifts for her neighbors' kids whenever she could. Her phone screen was cracked, her winter coat had a broken zipper. Her hands were always dry from soap and cleaning chemicals. But her daughter never went hungry, and their rent was always paid, barely. The apartment they lived in was on the 2nd floor of a run-down brick building just off Pulaski Avenue. 2 bedrooms, but one was barely bigger than a closet. The radiator hissed like it was angry to still be working. The stairs creaked, but it was home. Every morning, Jasmine packed Ava's lunch with whatever she could piece together, usually peanut butter sandwiches and apple slices. She'd leave a note in every one. "Be brave, Mama loves you." Ava was 7 now, smart, fierce, always asking questions Jasmine didn't always know how to answer. Why do people live on the street? Why don't we have a car? Why does Mama cry sometimes when she thinks no one's looking? She tried to keep the world gentle for Ava, but the world didn't care much about being gentle. And yet, Jasmine never complained. Not to her friends, not to her coworkers, not even to herself. She just kept going, kept pushing, because in her mind there was no other choice. She wasn't bitter, not really. She was just tired, a kind of deep, aching tired that didn't go away with sleep. But she wore her exhaustion like armor, and every day she got up and did it all over again. That night, when she saw the woman in the wheelchair, Jasmine had already worked an extra 3 hours. Her back hurt, her feet throbbed, her tips barely covered the cost of Ava's new snow boots, and she still had a mile-long walk home through icy streets ahead of her. But none of that mattered when she saw the old woman shivering in the dark, because that's just who Jasmine was. Even when the world had nothing left to give her, she still gave what she had. That was the moment that would start a fire that neither of them saw coming. She was kneeling in the snow, wrapping her coat around a stranger and whispering promises of safety. A spark that would start a fire big enough to destroy everything Jasmine thought she knew about her life, her value, and the people who have power in this world. It all began with a cup of tea, a warm towel, and a small act of kindness on a cold night in Chicago. The snow was falling harder now, covering the sidewalk in thick, uneven layers that made a crunching sound when Jasmine walked on them in her old sneakers. The wind slapped her face and made her breath hitch. It cut through the small holes in her coat like ice knives. She felt like she should go home. Her work shift was over. There was a daughter waiting for her. She had done enough for the day. But she couldn't stop looking at the woman. That wheelchair wasn't moving, not an inch. The old woman sat there motionless, her frail shoulders hunched against the cold, head tilted down like she was waiting for something or someone that just wasn't coming. Her coat was thin, barely more than a fall jacket. Her gloved hands clutched the armrests like she was trying to hold herself together. For a second, Jasmine hesitated. This wasn't her problem. She didn't know this woman. She didn't know what had happened, why she was there, or whether stepping in might somehow make things worse. Lord knows she'd been told enough times, don't get involved, it's not safe, mind your own. But Jasmine had never been good at walking past suffering. So she turned back toward the street, stepped into the snow, and made her way across the sidewalk. Her feet slid once on black ice near the curb, and she caught herself on a lamppost. A gust of wind nearly knocked her over. But she pushed on, determined, careful, heart pounding faster with every step. "Ma'am," she called gently, crouching down beside the wheelchair. "Can you hear me?" The old woman flinched, startled, her eyes blinking rapidly as if waking from a bad dream. She turned her head slowly toward Jasmine. Her face was pale, almost bluish from the cold, and her lips trembled as she spoke. I waited," she said, barely above a whisper. "My son, he said he'd come. From the clinic. I was sure he would." Her voice broke on the word sure. Jasmine swallowed hard, her throat tight. She didn't ask any more questions, didn't ask for names or phone numbers or reasons. She just reached into her coat pocket, pulled out a spare scarf she kept for Ava, and began wrapping it gently around the woman's shoulders. "You're freezing," Jasmine said, voice soft but steady. "We need to get you inside. I work at the diner just across the street. It's warm. We'll get you something hot to drink." "No, I don't want to be a bother," the woman murmured. "I'm just waiting." "You've waited long enough," Jasmine said. "Come on now, let's go." She stood, took hold of the wheelchair's icy handles, and began pushing. The wheels groaned against the snow-packed pavement. One of them stuck in a crack in the sidewalk, and Jasmine had to lean into it with everything she had, her legs slipping slightly as she forced it loose. The cold bit at her fingers, her toes were numb, but she kept moving. Inside the diner, the warmth hit like a wall. She pushed the chair to the booth nearest the radiator. The woman's teeth chattered now that her body was starting to thaw. Jasmine grabbed a stack of clean kitchen towels, ran them under warm water, and brought them back to wrap around her hands and feet. "What's your name, sweetheart?" Jasmine asked. "Evelyn," the woman said, voice shaking. "Okay, Miss Evelyn, Jasmine said gently. "You sit right here. I'm going to get you something warm." She poured a fresh cup of coffee, added a splash of cream and 2 sugars, comfort in a mug. Then she ladled out a bowl of chicken noodle soup, the good kind, made from scratch every morning, and toasted 2 slices of bread with a little butter on the side. When she placed the tray in front of Evelyn, the woman just stared at it for a moment, like she couldn't believe it was real. "You didn't have to do this," she said softly. "I know," Jasmine replied, "but you're here, and you're cold, and I would want someone to do the same for my mom." Evelyn's eyes welled with tears. She picked up the spoon with shaking fingers and took a bite, then another, then another. "I don't even know your name," she said between mouthfuls. "Jasmine," she said with a smile. "Jasmine Reed." "Well, Miss Jasmine Reed, you are a very kind young woman. Thank you." Jasmine nodded, sitting across from her, arms crossed against her chest, watching carefully. There was something about Evelyn, something that felt out of place in this part of town. The way she carried herself, her pearls, the softness of her voice. She didn't look like someone who belonged out on the street. But Jasmine didn't ask. Not yet. For now, all that mattered was that she was safe, warm, and fed. Outside, the wind howled louder, the snow kept falling. And inside that quiet little diner, 2 women, worlds apart, shared soup and silence, and the first fragile moment of connection neither of them knew would change everything. The diner was nearly empty now, just the low hum of the fridge in the back and the occasional hiss of the radiator filling the silence. The kind of quiet that usually only came in the deep hours of the night, when the city held its breath and the world outside slowed down just enough for people to notice their own thoughts. Evelyn had stopped shaking. Her hands still trembled a little when she lifted the spoon to her lips, but her color was better now. The deep purple around her fingertips had faded, and her cheeks carried the faintest pink from the warmth. Jasmine sat across from her, her arms folded on the table, elbows resting on the cool formica surface. She didn't have anywhere to be, not really. Her shift was long over, the diner was closed, but something told her this moment mattered. That this wasn't just a random act of kindness she'd walk away from and forget by morning. "So," Jasmine said quietly, "you were at the clinic?" Evelyn nodded. "Routine visit. I go twice a month. Arthritis, among other things. Some days are harder than others." Jasmine glanced down at her hands. They looked delicate, elegant even, but worn. Her nails were clean and trimmed, her knuckles swollen just slightly. "Your son was supposed to pick you up?" Another small nod. Evelyn's spoon hovered over the bowl, then slowly lowered. She looked past Jasmine, out the window, where the snow kept falling. "He usually remembers," she said softly. "But sometimes work becomes more important than people." That landed heavier than Jasmine expected. She'd heard it before, felt it in her bones, even if the words were never said out loud. She remembered how her daughter's father slowly stopped showing up. First missed birthdays, then holidays, then silence. "I'm sorry," Jasmine said, and she meant it. "Don't be," Evelyn replied, setting her spoon down with a small clink. "He's not a bad person, just busy, important, always running toward the next big thing. Sometimes I wonder if he even realizes how far he's gotten from where he started." Jasmine tilted her head. And where was that? Evelyn smiled faintly, as if recalling a memory that only belonged to a different version of her life. "A small apartment in Detroit. I was a school teacher. My husband drove a delivery truck. We didn't have much, but we had dinner together every night. Liam, my son, he was a dreamer. He wanted to be bigger than the world we gave him. And he got there?" "Oh, yes," Evelyn said, eyes glinting. "CEO of one of the top manufacturing firms in the Midwest. Liam Pierce. Maybe you've heard of him." Jasmine blinked. The name was familiar. Billboards, magazine covers, press conferences. She hadn't made the connection. But now, looking at Evelyn, her composure, her voice, her subtle elegance, it all made sense. But Jasmine didn't react like most people would. She didn't get wide-eyed or start asking about money or fame. Instead, she leaned in, her voice soft and grounded. "You don't strike me as someone who wants to be known for who your son is." Evelyn's smile deepened. "That's very observant of you." "I've met enough people to know the difference," Jasmine said. "Some folks wear their connections like badges. You just wanted a warm place to sit and someone to treat you like you mattered." Evelyn looked at her across the table, something shifting in her expression. Respect, maybe? Or relief? "You're right," she said. I didn't want to freeze alone on a sidewalk tonight." That's all. Jasmine reached for her coffee and took a slow sip. Then she slid a napkin across the table and gently dabbed at a spot of soup on Evelyn's cardigan. "You don't ever have to explain needing kindness," she said. "Not to me." They sat in silence for a while after that, watching the snow fall beyond the window. Evelyn eventually reached into her purse, a small, structured leather bag, and pulled out a photograph. She passed it across the table. It was a picture of her and Liam, maybe 15 years ago. He was younger then, clean-shaven, bright-eyed. She looked happy, genuinely happy. "That was before the world sped up," Evelyn murmured, "before boardrooms and security details and quarterly reports." Jasmine handed the photo back gently. "He's still your little boy in your heart?" "Every day," Evelyn whispered. Jasmine nodded, understanding something deeper than words could say. The radiator clanked behind them. The lights above flickered once. And in that quiet, fading diner on Lincoln Street, a waitress and a stranger, who were strangers no more, shared something rare and deeply human. Connection. The kind that doesn't care about last names or bank balances. The kind that shows up, even in the middle of a snowstorm, even when it's inconvenient. The kind that reminds us all of what matters when the world forgets. The next morning, Jasmine barely had time to think. She'd gotten home around 1:30 a.m. after walking Evelyn to the taxi and watching it drive off into the snowy dark. The woman had insisted she'd be fine, that someone would be home, that she'd call her doctor in the morning, but Jasmine still felt uneasy. She hadn't slept well. Her body ached, but her mind had kept replaying the night over and over. The way Evelyn had looked at her, the way she clutched her purse like it was the last solid thing she had left. By 6:30 a.m., Jasmine was back up, packing a lunch for Ava, trying to find matching socks in the laundry pile, brushing tangles out of her daughter's hair while reheating leftover oatmeal on the stove. Ava had no idea what kind of night her mom had just had. She just wanted to know if they could make snowmen after school. Jasmine smiled and said maybe. She dropped Ava off at the community center, then headed straight to the diner for her morning shift. The sun was barely rising, casting a pale orange light over the salt-crusted sidewalks. The wind hadn't let up, and the cold still clung to everything like grief. By 9 a.m., the diner was picking up. Locals in puffy jackets stomped snow off their boots, ordered coffee and eggs, and crowded into booths. The radio played faintly above the clatter of plates and silverware. Jasmine was wiping down a table near the front when the door opened. She didn't notice at first, not until the cold draft swept across the floor, and not until the room went quiet. It wasn't loud to begin with, but the stillness that settled over the diner in that moment was different. She looked up. Standing in the doorway was a man. Tall, sharp suit, coat tailored to perfection, shoes polished so clean they reflected the checkerboard tiles. His hair was dark at the roots, but silver at the temples, and he had the kind of face that looked like it had been carved from stone. Strong jaw, serious eyes, expression unreadable. He didn't hesitate. He scanned the diner quickly, then walked directly toward her. Each step was precise, controlled, purposeful. Jasmine stood frozen, still holding the rag in one hand. Something about him, it wasn't fear exactly, it was alertness. Like she knew this man mattered, even if she didn't know why yet. "You're Jasmine Reed?" he asked, his voice low but firm. She nodded slowly. Yes? My name is Liam Pierce, he said. And just like that, everything shifted. Jasmine felt her stomach tighten. She remembered the name. Evelyn had said it last night. Her son. The one who didn't come. The one who left her in the snow. I believe you helped my mother last night, he said. Jasmine set the rag down on the table and crossed her arms. I did. Is she all right? She is, thanks to you, he said, though his tone was clipped, almost clinical, like he was reading from a script. She said you were supposed to pick her up from the clinic, Jasmine said evenly. Liam's jaw flexed. There was a scheduling conflict. My assistant handled it. Well, your assistant wasn't the one freezing outside at midnight. A few nearby patrons pretended not to listen, but the tension in the room was obvious. Jasmine didn't care. She wasn't rude, but she wasn't going to sugarcoat it either. Liam looked at her, studied her, like she was some kind of anomaly. I'm not here to argue, he said finally. I just came to thank you. She raised an eyebrow. You don't need to. Your mom needed help. I helped. He pulled a slim white envelope from his coat pocket and placed it on the table. I insist, he said. Jasmine looked down at it. Clean. Crisp. Her name written neatly on the front. She didn't even need to open it to know what was inside. Money. She shook her head. I didn't do it for a reward. It's not charity, he said. It's gratitude. She pushed the envelope back across the table. Gratitude doesn't have a dollar sign. For the first time, something flickered in Liam's eyes. Not anger, not offense, surprise. He wasn't used to people saying no. Jasmine didn't look away. She didn't flinch. She just stood there in her slightly stained apron, her hair pulled back in a quick bun, her hands still red from scrubbing dishes, and held her ground. There was a long pause. Then Liam slipped the envelope back into his coat pocket. Very well, he said, but if you change your mind, I won't, she said simply. He gave her one last look, something between curiosity and respect, then turned and walked out. The door swung shut behind him. The room stayed quiet for a second longer. Then the diner slowly returned to normal. Coffee being poured, plates being cleared, chatter picking back up. But Jasmine stood there a moment longer, staring at the door, her heart still beating too fast. She had no idea what she'd just stepped into, but she had a feeling this wasn't the last time she'd see Liam Pierce. It had been 3 days since Liam Pierce walked into the Lincoln Street diner, dropped her name like a corporate memo, and tried to hand her an envelope full of cash. Jasmine had thought that would be the end of it. A wealthy man embarrassed by his own negligence, doing what he thought was expected, throwing money at a problem and hoping it would go away. She figured she'd never see him again, and honestly, she preferred it that way. But on Friday afternoon, he came back. It was slower than usual in the diner. A cold front had moved in, the kind that cut through your coat and made coffee taste better, and Jasmine was working a double shift. She'd just finished clearing a booth near the window when the bell above the door rang. She didn't even look up at first, just called out, "Grab a seat wherever." Then she heard the footsteps, that same measured, expensive sound of leather soles against old tile. When she turned, there he was again, Liam Pierce, in a charcoal wool coat that probably cost more than her rent for the year, with snow melting off his shoulders and his phone still in hand. But this time, he didn't carry an envelope, and his expression wasn't as cold. "I assume you're still not taking money," he said by way of greeting. She crossed her arms, a smile tugging at the corner of her mouth. "You assume right." He nodded once, almost as if he respected it, even if he didn't understand it. "I came to offer something different," he said, lowering his phone and slipping it into his coat pocket. "A job." Jasmine blinked. "A job?" "Yes, at Pierce Industries." She stared at him for a second, waiting for the punchline, but it didn't come. "I'm serious," he added. "I run a large team. We're expanding a new division. I think you'd be an asset." "I'm a waitress," she said flatly. "I've never worked in an office. I don't even own a computer that turns on in under 10 minutes." Liam didn't flinch. "You helped my mother. You made decisions under pressure. You showed empathy, leadership, and integrity. You paid attention to details, stayed calm, and took initiative without being asked. Those are skills, and I can teach you the rest." Jasmine let out a short laugh, but there was no real humor in it. "Why me?" she asked. "Because I did the decent thing? Because I helped your mother when you didn't show up?" He met her gaze. "Because I want people like you on my team. People who don't make decisions based on what they'll get back." She looked down, unsure what to say. Her hands were still damp from wiping tables. Her shoes were cracking near the toes. The smell of grease and old coffee clung to her skin like a second coat. This was her world. It was small, yes, but it was familiar. The idea of stepping into his world, it felt like trying to breathe underwater. "I've never worked for someone like you," she said quietly. "And I've never hired someone like you," Liam replied. "Maybe that's the point." There was a pause. Then he pulled a small card from his wallet and slid it across the table. His direct office line, his assistant's name, a meeting time already penciled in. "Monday, 10 a.m. If you're not there, I'll assume it's a no," he said. Jasmine didn't pick up the card. Not yet. Liam nodded once more and turned to go. But just before he reached the door, he paused. "For what it's worth," he added, not turning around, "my mother talks about you like you're the first real person she's met in years." And then he was gone. The bell jingled, the cold swept in, and the card on the table stared back at her like a dare. Jasmine sat down in the booth, her heart doing strange things in her chest. A job at a company she knew only from billboards and news headlines. Offered not because she begged or applied, but because someone saw something in her. Something she wasn't even sure she believed about herself. She stared at the card for a long time. Then she picked it up and slipped it into her pocket, just in case. Jasmine stared at the business card for the rest of her shift like it might change into something else if she looked at it long enough. Liam Pierce, CEO. A man with everything, power, money, reputation, had just offered her a seat at his table, or at least a chair somewhere near the hallway of his world. It didn't make sense. People like her didn't get invited into boardrooms. They didn't get personal visits from billionaires or job offers without resumes. They worked doubles, they counted tips, they stretched grocery budgets like magicians, and they prayed the rent wouldn't go up. That was the reality she knew. One wrong move and everything could fall apart. By the time she got home that night, her head was spinning. Her daughter Ava greeted her at the door, arms wide, socks mismatched as always. "Mama, you're home!" That alone made Jasmine smile. She scooped her up, held her close, and tried to push the day out of her mind. Dinner was leftover spaghetti, and while Ava ate, Jasmine sat at the kitchen table, cards still in hand, wondering what the right move was. The apartment was quiet. The hum of the fridge, the clink of Ava's fork against her bowl, the soft buzz of the space heater in the corner. It was all familiar, safe, and yet fragile. She walked over to the window, looked out at the dark city blocks, at the flickering street light that never quite worked right. It had been home for years, but it was never meant to be permanent, just a place to survive. She thought about Evelyn, about that night, about the soup, the scarf, the quiet moment where two women shared more than food. That wasn't a strategy. That was just human instinct. And somehow, it mattered to someone like Liam Pierce. She turned the card over in her hand, like maybe the back would give her the answer she was missing. A job at Pierce Industries. She didn't even know what the role was. She hadn't asked. The idea of working in a corporate office felt about as foreign as going to the moon. She didn't own a briefcase, she didn't talk like those people, she didn't have the clothes or the degree or the perfect LinkedIn profile. What if she failed? What if she embarrassed herself? What if she said yes and everything fell apart? Later that night, after Ava was asleep, after Jasmine had done the dishes, checked the locks, and sat for a few minutes in silence, she finally picked up the phone and called her best friend, Mariah. Mariah had been her rock since high school, the one who always gave it to her straight. "Girl, if you don't go to that meeting, I will personally drag you there myself," Mariah said, laughing. "You helped that man's mama, and he's not trying to toss you a check and walk away. He's offering a seat at the table. You know how rare that is?" "I'm not cut out for that world," Jasmine replied. "It's suits and finance and office politics. I don't even own heels that don't pinch." "Then wear flats and bring that same energy you had when you helped that woman in the snow," Mariah said. "You're real. People need that. Trust me." Jasmine didn't argue. She just let the words settle. That night, she laid in bed staring at the ceiling, thinking about everything and nothing. About bills, about Ava, about Evelyn. About whether courage was something you could borrow or something you had to build. At one point, she rolled over and looked at the card again. It was still sitting on her nightstand, right where she left it. She reached out, picked it up, and placed it gently into her purse. She didn't know what Monday morning would bring, but she knew this much. She was tired of surviving. Maybe it was time to try living. Monday morning arrived like a freight train. Jasmine woke up before the alarm. The sun wasn't even out yet, but her mind was already racing. She stood in front of her small bedroom closet, biting her lip, staring at clothes that felt like they belonged to someone else's life. Diner uniforms, a few casual sweaters, faded jeans. Nothing even close to corporate. She eventually chose a plain navy blouse and her one pair of dress pants, the same ones she'd worn to her cousin's wedding last year. They were a little snug, but they would have to do. She tied her hair back into a neat bun, dabbed on some concealer, and stared at herself in the mirror. She didn't look like a woman walking into a billion-dollar company. She looked like a single mom who had $22 in her checking account. But she was going anyway. Ava was already up, still rubbing sleep from her eyes, curled up on the couch with her teddy bear. Jasmine made her pancakes from the last bit of mix they had, kissed her forehead, and promised to be back by dinner. By 8:30 a.m., Jasmine stood outside the towering glass building of Pierce Industries. It stretched into the sky like it owned the clouds. Black steel and shimmering glass windows reflected the cold morning light. She could see her reflection in the door. Small, uncertain, but standing upright. "All right," she whispered to herself, "let's do this." She stepped into the lobby, and the world changed. It was like walking into another universe. The air smelled like fresh linen and citrus. The floors were polished marble, shining so bright she could see the ceiling in them. A waterfall installation ran along the back wall, water cascading in delicate sheets behind a white reception desk manned by 2 people in headsets. Jasmine clutched her purse tightly and made her way to the front desk. "Hi, I'm here to see Mr. Pierce," she said, her voice a touch too soft. The receptionist barely looked up. "Name?" "Jasmine Reed." He said 10 o'clock. A few clicks on the keyboard, then a pause. "Yes, Miss Reed, you're on the list. Please take elevator 3 to the 43rd floor. Someone will meet you there." Jasmine nodded, trying to act like this was normal, like she knew exactly where she was going, like she wasn't about to pass out. The elevator ride felt like ascending into another life. As it climbed, she looked at the glowing floor numbers and reminded herself to breathe. Ding! The doors opened to a quiet hallway with floor-to-ceiling windows. A woman was waiting, tall, sleek, blazer sharp enough to cut glass. "You must be Jasmine," she said. "I'm Nina, Mr. Pierce's assistant. Right this way." They walked through a series of glass-walled offices, each more modern than the last. Everyone inside looked busy, important, fast-moving. Jasmine caught glimpses of PowerPoint presentations, charts, endless emails. People in pencil skirts and tailored suits talked into Bluetooth earpieces, sipped matcha lattes, and barely glanced in her direction. By the time they reached the last office, larger than Jasmine's apartment, her heart was thudding in her ears. Liam stood by the window, looking out over the city skyline. When he turned, his expression was unreadable. "Ms. Reed," he said, "right on time." She stepped forward, nervous but steady. "I figured being late wouldn't make the best first impression." A flicker of amusement passed across his face. "Correct." He gestured for her to sit. The meeting wasn't what she expected. Liam didn't ask about her resume. He already knew she didn't have one for this kind of job. He didn't throw around buzzwords or make her feel small. Instead, he asked how she solved problems, how she thought under pressure, what she valued in people. Jasmine answered honestly, sometimes awkwardly, sometimes with humor, but always real. And that, somehow, seemed to matter. After 30 minutes, he stood and handed her a simple offer letter. A junior operations support position, full-time, salary, benefits, training included. It wasn't glamorous, but it was a door, a real one. "Why me?" she asked again, looking at the paper in her hands. "Because you saw someone in need and didn't ask what was in it for you," Liam said. "And I want that kind of thinking in my company." She didn't say yes right away. She told him she needed to go home and think. She needed to pick up her daughter. Process. He nodded. But as she stepped into the elevator, holding that letter like it was made of glass, she felt it again. That tug, that pull. She was stepping into a world she didn't recognize. But maybe, just maybe, it needed someone like her. Jasmine's first week at Pierce Industries felt like being dropped onto another planet. Everything moved fast. People spoke in acronyms she didn't understand. Slack channels buzzed nonstop. The office was filled with glass walls, standing desks, and people who walked like they were chasing time itself. She felt out of place, at first, but she paid attention. She showed up early, stayed late, and took notes on everything. She watched how people spoke in meetings, when they leaned in, when they checked out. She learned who smiled out of politeness and who smiled with purpose. And she learned that being underestimated had a certain power. Nobody expected much from her. She was the waitress girl, the charity hire, the warm-hearted fluke. Most people didn't even try to remember her name at first, but that was fine. It gave her space to observe. And what she saw didn't sit right. It started with a meeting on Thursday. Jasmine had been assigned to shadow the operations team on an internal audit of the Midwest manufacturing project, one of the biggest upcoming partnerships the company was exploring. She wasn't leading anything, just listening. But she kept hearing the same phrase over and over again: cost optimization. Now, Jasmine didn't have an MBA, but she understood people. And every time someone said cost optimization, they also said downsizing, restructuring, or resource reduction, which, translated to plain English, meant layoffs, hundreds of them. It didn't match what Liam had told her. He'd said this expansion was about growth, about community reinvestment, but what Jasmine saw on those slides looked more like a cold exit strategy. Cutting staff, outsourcing labor, stripping local jobs for cheaper contracts overseas. At first, she thought maybe she misunderstood. So she stayed late one night and went through the files again, carefully. Buried in the expense reports were unusually large consulting fees, paid to outside firms with no real traceable portfolios. The contracts were vague, the deliverables unclear, but the payment schedules were consistent and large. Too large. She dug deeper, found a spreadsheet that wasn't supposed to be in her shared folder. A mistake. One line item linked the consulting group back to a company registered in Delaware, one owned by Marcus Holt, the company's CFO. That made her stop. Marcus Holt was polished, strategic. He had been with Pierce Industries for years, longer than Liam even. Everyone treated him like he was untouchable. And he was the one pushing this cost-optimized deal the hardest. Jasmine sat in her tiny workstation that Friday evening, the rest of the office emptying out, her stomach in knots. She knew what she'd found. This wasn't just a business decision. It was a setup, a plan to siphon money from a fake consulting group tied to Marcus Holt's private holding company, disguised as part of the company's official growth strategy. He'd profit off the layoffs, off the dismantling of real jobs, and it had slipped through because no one questioned him. No one, except her. She leaned back in her chair, hands trembling just slightly. She wasn't supposed to find this. She wasn't supposed to even be in that folder. She could close the file, walk away, pretend she didn't see it. No one would know, but she'd know. And that was enough. She printed 2 copies, one for her records, one for Liam, and sealed them in an envelope, just in case. Then she shut down her computer, grabbed her coat, and headed out into the cold Chicago night. The wind hit her hard, but her feet didn't slow. She had come from a world where people like her didn't get to speak truth to power, where it was easier and safer to stay quiet. But she wasn't that woman anymore, and she wasn't about to let the kind of people who smiled in suits and stole behind closed doors keep winning. She didn't know how Liam would react. She didn't know if he would believe her or protect her. But she knew one thing for sure. She had to try. Because integrity meant doing the right thing, even when no one was watching, especially then. Monday came fast, but Jasmine came prepared. She'd barely slept over the weekend. Her thoughts kept circling the same questions. What if she was wrong? What if she was right? What if bringing this to Liam backfired and she lost everything? What if no one believed her? Just the waitress girl who got lucky? But fear wasn't enough to stop her. Not anymore. By 9 a.m., she stood outside the glass-paneled conference room on the 43rd floor. Inside, executives were gathering. Marcus Holt, CFO of Pierce Industries, stood at the head of the long oak table, smooth as always. His suit was crisp, his smile was effortless. His hands rested confidently on a sleek black laptop. This wasn't just a regular check-in, this was a major pitch. Marcus was presenting the final strategy for the Midwest manufacturing merger, a plan that would increase profit margins by 38% over 3 quarters, according to the slide deck Jasmine had seen last Friday. What it didn't mention was the human cost. She watched as department heads filed in, some with coffee, others with tablets. Liam arrived last, quiet as usual, phone in one hand. He greeted no one, but everyone noticed. Jasmine hesitated at the door. She wasn't on the invite list. She wasn't supposed to be there. But then again, Marcus wasn't supposed to be robbing the company either. She took a breath, pushed the door open, and walked in. Conversations dipped for just a second as heads turned. She saw it. Confusion in a few faces, annoyance in others. Marcus's eyes narrowed for half a beat before he smoothed over the reaction. "Miss Reed," he said, pretending to smile, "I believe your team meets on the 2nd floor, not up here." "I know," Jasmine said calmly, "but this involves all of us." The room fell quiet again. Liam looked up from his phone, surprised to see her there. "I think you're going to want to hear what she has to say," Jasmine added, looking directly at him. Liam paused, then gave her a slight nod. "Go ahead." Jasmine stepped forward, her voice steady but strong. "Last week, I found a set of expense reports and consulting contracts related to the Midwest project. At first glance, they looked normal. External strategy teams, vendor support, all the usual stuff. But there were irregularities in the amounts. Too high, too frequent. She set a printed packet on the table and slid it toward Liam. "I cross-referenced the vendor registry. One of those consulting firms is connected to a shell company based in Delaware. That company, in turn, is linked to a holding corporation registered to Marcus Holt." Murmurs broke out, chairs shifted, faces changed. Jasmine continued. "It's fraud, disguised as efficiency. And the layoffs you're about to approve? They're designed to maximize the payout for one person, not the company." Marcus laughed, not loudly, but loud enough. "This is absurd," he said. "She's a waitress, a new hire. She doesn't even have access to—" "I had access because someone forgot to update permissions on an internal audit folder," Jasmine cut in, not blinking. "It was a mistake, but I made copies, and I checked everything twice." She turned to the room, scanning each face. "You don't have to take my word for it. The numbers speak for themselves. If you move forward with this, you're not just laying off real people. You're helping one man steal from everyone in this room." Dead silence. For a long beat, no one said anything, not even Liam. Then, slowly, he picked up the packet, flipped through the pages. His expression didn't change, but something in his eyes sharpened. "Leave the room," he told Marcus without looking up. Marcus froze. "Excuse me?" "I said, leave the room." Marcus looked around the table, hoping for support, but no one spoke, no one moved. Even the ones who had been nodding along just minutes before were now stone-faced. After a long, tense moment, Marcus stood, adjusted his jacket, and walked out. The door clicked shut behind him. Liam looked at Jasmine. "Stay." She sat down, heart racing but hands steady. And in that moment, she realized something. She had crossed the line, the one between silence and truth, between surviving and leading. And she hadn't done it with degrees or money or power. She'd done it by standing up for people who didn't even know their jobs were on the line. She didn't know what would happen next, but she knew this. If she had to choose again, she'd still speak up, every time. The next few days at Pierce Industries felt different. The energy in the office had shifted. Conversations that used to happen openly now happened behind closed doors. People Jasmine barely knew started looking at her twice, some with curiosity, others with caution. She could feel it in the hallway glances, in the way elevator small talk got shorter, colder. Her name had spread faster than the morning coffee. She had called out a top executive in front of the company's leadership team. And even if she had done the right thing, that didn't mean everyone agreed with her, especially the ones who had something to lose. At first, she told herself it was just paranoia. Maybe she was reading too much into the awkward pauses, the emails she didn't get copied on anymore, the meetings she wasn't invited to. But then the little things started piling up. On Wednesday morning, she logged into her workstation and found her access credentials had been revoked. Temporarily, according to IT. Routine system reset, they said. But no one else in her department had that issue. Her name was missing from the updated project list for the Midwest Operations Division. No explanation, no conversation. Then her ID badge stopped working at the side entrance. She had to go around to the front, sign in like a visitor. And that's when it clicked. This wasn't a mistake. It was pushback. The machine she'd spoken out against wasn't going to roll over quietly. It was going to push her to the margins, make her feel small again, erase her bit by bit without ever saying her name out loud. Later that day, as she sat at her desk eating lunch alone, she noticed two senior team members standing by the glass wall of the conference room, speaking in hushed voices. They looked right at her, just for a second, then looked away. Her stomach tightened. She could feel the walls closing in. That evening, she got a call from Mariah. "You okay?" her friend asked. "I don't know," Jasmine admitted. "I did the right thing. I know I did. But now, it's like they're trying to make me disappear without firing me." "Of course they are," Mariah said bluntly. "You embarrassed powerful people. You pulled the rug out from under someone who built a whole system to protect himself. They're trying to make an example out of you." "Yeah," Jasmine said quietly. "It's working." Mariah didn't skip a beat. "No, it's not. Because you're still showing up. And people are watching. Even if they don't say it, they see what's happening. So you stand tall. You walk in there like you belong, because you do. You didn't get in by luck. You got in because they needed someone to shake the place up." Jasmine wanted to believe that, but the weight of it was real. The next morning, she got an email. Anonymous sender, no subject line, just a screenshot, an internal message thread between two executives. One of them had typed, "She's not going to last. She's an emotional hire. Let her burn out. No one will back her." Jasmine stared at the screen. She wasn't angry. She wasn't even shocked. She was tired. Not from the work, but from the quiet war being waged around her. And that's when she made a decision. If they wanted her gone, they were going to have to do more than ignore her. They were going to have to fight her out the front door. She got up, walked into HR, and scheduled a formal meeting with Liam. Not with an assistant, not through channels, direct. And she wrote a memo, clear, factual, and professional, outlining everything. The access denials, the missing assignments, the message thread, and the subtle retaliation. Not to complain, not to play victim, but to document. She had played by the rules. Now she would protect her seat at the table the same way she earned it, with the truth. By Friday afternoon, Liam's office called her in, and as she stepped into that room, she didn't feel like the waitress anymore. She felt like a woman who had finally found her voice, and no whisper campaign was going to silence her again. Jasmine sat across from Liam in his office, the city skyline stretching behind him like a wall of frozen steel and light. The floor-to-ceiling windows cast a cold glow across the room, but the tension between them was warmer, charged. He didn't speak at first, he just studied her. Her memo was on the table between them, printed and marked with notes. It looked official, serious, like it had been read more than once. "You've made some strong claims," Liam said finally, his voice low, even. "They're not claims," Jasmine replied. "They're facts, and you know it." He didn't flinch, just nodded slowly. "I do." That surprised her. She had come in braced for resistance, for another corporate dismissal wrapped in polished language. Instead, he leaned back in his chair and steepled his fingers. "I've been watching," he said. "You've handled this with more discipline than some people twice your age and 10 times your pay grade. I want you to know that." Jasmine let out a slow breath she didn't realize she was holding. "But," he continued, "you also need to understand what happens next." She raised an eyebrow. "Meaning?" "Meaning we're not just talking about one man and one fake consulting firm. Marcus Holt built a network, quiet, protected, deeply embedded. If we pull this thread, we may not like what else unravels. There are board members with skin in this game, strategic partners, shareholders." Jasmine didn't look away. "So we just look the other way?" Liam's jaw tightened. "No," he said, "but we move carefully." He stood and walked toward the window, looking out over the city. "Do you know what this company was worth when I took over?" "No," Jasmine said. $200 million. Struggling, reputation in the gutter. My father left it a mess. I cleaned it up, turned it into a $10 billion powerhouse. And I did it without shortcuts." He turned back to her. "But if we go public with this now, the fallout could cost us everything. Jobs, contracts, trust. That's what you're asking me to risk." She stood too, slowly, steady. "No," she said. "I'm not asking you to risk it. I'm asking you to protect it. The real company, the one that's not run by shadow deals and backroom favors. You said you hired me because I saw people. This, right now, is where you prove you see them too." Liam stared at her, hard. Then he exhaled through his nose and gave a small nod. "All right," he said. "We do it your way." The next 48 hours moved fast. Liam called an emergency meeting of the Executive Compliance Board. Jasmine was brought in to present the evidence directly, with documents, screenshots, and a full report. Legal reviewed the findings, confirmed the connections, and began drafting statements. By the end of the week, Marcus Holt was removed from his position. The press release was carefully worded, "Executive transition due to internal restructuring." But insiders knew the truth. Whispers spread like wildfire. And while no one said Jasmine's name publicly, those within the company started to see her differently. Some with respect, some with fear, some with grudging admiration, and some still waited for her to fall. Liam met with her again late Friday evening. His office was quieter this time, less formal. "You did what most people wouldn't," he said. "You held your ground when it counted. That matters." Jasmine didn't smile. She was too tired for that. "What now?" she asked. Liam shrugged. "We rebuild. Smarter, cleaner, stronger, with the right people at the table." He paused, then added, "You're one of those people." Jasmine blinked. "You want me to stay?" "I want you to lead." He handed her a folder, an official offer, a promotion, higher pay, new title, a permanent place on the operations strategy team. She looked down at it, then back at him. "I'll think about it," she said. Liam raised an eyebrow, but nodded. "Fair." As she left the building that night, the city felt different, brighter, like something had shifted, not just in the company, but in her. She had come in as the outsider, but now she was someone they had to reckon with, and this time she didn't need anyone's permission to belong. News travels fast in corporate America, especially when it involves a scandal, a fall from power, and someone unexpected rising in the middle of it all. By Monday morning, Marcus Holt's name was removed from the executive board directory. His office was emptied, the door quietly closed. Officially, it was called retirement under mutual agreement. Unofficially, everyone knew what had happened, and everyone knew who had made it happen. Jasmine didn't walk into the building that morning like a hero. She wasn't dressed any differently. She didn't carry herself like someone who had just taken down a senior executive. But people moved differently around her now. Some nodded, some stepped aside in the hallway. A few whispered when she passed. She wasn't invisible anymore. And she wasn't just that waitress girl either. She was Jasmine Reed, the woman who stood up when no one else would. Later that afternoon, Pierce Industries held a town hall in the central atrium, glass ceiling above, the city stretching high around them. Liam took the stage alone, no flashy slideshow or PR team behind him. He addressed the employees directly. "There comes a point in every company's life," he said, "when its values are tested, not by slogans on a wall, but by the actions of the people who work here." He paused, then added, "Last week, someone in this company saw something wrong, and instead of staying silent, she spoke up. Not for applause, not for status, but because it was the right thing to do." He didn't say Jasmine's name, but he didn't have to. People turned their heads. Eyes found her standing quietly near the back, hands clasped in front of her, heart pounding. "We owe her, and ourselves, better," Liam said. "Because integrity isn't a marketing strategy. It's a decision, one we make every day." Applause followed, not loud, but honest. It wasn't the sound of people cheering a victory. It was the sound of people recognizing something real. After the town hall, Liam walked straight to Jasmine. No cameras, no spotlight, just a simple thank you. "You changed the culture here," he said, "and not many people can say that." Jasmine didn't know what to say back, so she just nodded. "I didn't do it for the culture. I did it for the people whose jobs were on the line." "Exactly," Liam replied. "That's why it mattered." The following week, Jasmine accepted the offer to join the operations strategy team full-time. Not because of the title or the raise, though both would help her and Ava tremendously, but because she realized something she hadn't believed before. She belonged here. Not because someone gave her a seat, but because she earned one. The work wasn't easy. The meetings were still long. The learning curve was still steep, but she didn't flinch anymore when people challenged her. She asked questions. She pushed back when something didn't make sense. She used her voice, and it made a difference. One afternoon, a junior analyst from another department stopped her in the break room. "Hey, Jasmine," he said, almost nervously. "Just wanted to say thank you. My uncle was part of the Midwest team. He didn't know what was about to happen, but he knows now who saved his job." Jasmine smiled. Tell him I said hi." Back home, things began to change too. Ava noticed first. "You smile more, Mama," she said one night while they were making dinner. "I do?" Jasmine asked, stirring the pot of chili. "Yeah," Ava said. "You look strong." Jasmine laughed. "Well, maybe that's because I feel strong." And she did. Not because she had all the answers or because life suddenly got easier, but because she had faced the storm and didn't bend. She'd stood up for people who didn't even know her name, and in doing so, found something she hadn't expected, her place. Not just in a company, not just in an office, but in her own life. She was no longer just surviving, she was building. For herself, for Ava, for anyone watching quietly, wondering if one voice could make a difference. It could, and it did. 6 months later, the snow returned to Chicago. The streets looked familiar. Same sharp winds, same hurried footsteps, same soft hush over the city when everything turned white. But for Jasmine Reed, everything was different now. She stood at the window of her new office, not big, but hers, overlooking a part of the city she used to walk through with aching feet and a heavy heart. Now she saw it with new eyes, not just as a survivor, but as a contributor, a voice that mattered. There was a photo on her desk, Ava, grinning, 2 front teeth missing, holding a Best Helper certificate from her class. Next to it was a framed note from Evelyn Pierce, handwritten in looping cursive, "Thank you for seeing me when no one else did." Jasmine still visited Evelyn once a month. They shared tea, laughter, and memories of days that now felt like part of a different lifetime. Liam had repaired his relationship with his mother, slowly, quietly. But the warmth had returned. Jasmine never took credit for that, but Evelyn insisted she played a part. Pierce Industries was changing too. The company had instituted new transparency policies, stronger checks and balances, and leadership diversity initiatives. And while Jasmine didn't see herself as the face of any movement, she did serve on a committee now, making sure ethics weren't just words on a mission statement. She still worked hard, still doubted herself on tough days, still dealt with pushback when she challenged long-standing systems. But she never backed down again, because she had learned something most people go their whole lives never fully realizing. Power doesn't always wear a suit. Sometimes it wears scrubs, or a uniform, or a diner apron. And sometimes power is as simple and as strong as someone refusing to look away. That night, after locking up, Jasmine walked through the city with Ava by her side. They laughed about the way the snow squeaked under their boots. Ava caught snowflakes on her tongue. They passed the old Lincoln Street diner, still glowing under its flickering neon light. Jasmine paused. She remembered the night it all started. A freezing street, a forgotten woman, and a decision so small, so quiet, it barely felt like a decision at all. But it changed everything. And that's the lesson she carried with her, what she hoped others would take from her story. Not that she rose to power, not that she faced down a corrupt executive, not even that she proved she was more than her paycheck, but that kindness is never wasted. One small act, one human moment. That's all it takes to shift a life. Maybe even a company. Maybe even a future. So, if you're listening to this story, if you've ever felt invisible, overlooked, or out of place, remember this. You don't have to have all the answers. You don't have to wait for permission. You don't have to be rich or perfect or powerful. You just have to be willing to do the right thing, even when no one's watching, because someone always is. And that one act of courage, it could change someone's life, maybe even your own.